you for inviting us to this important commemoration. And let me also greet my dear sister Fatima, and of course our advocates, our sister Gumbi. I mean, this is a powerful statement she just made. And of course, acknowledge the chairs and my dear brother Bernardo. I'm so glad to have listened to the vision that Bernardo carries for the future of education on the continent. And I'm so glad to also know that the AUPSC is actually inviting him to address this important body on the very issue of AI. And that is extremely strategic and a welcome development. Now, having listened to my dear sister Gumbi, it's very difficult to go down and to be only bogged down by the challenges we face. And I think it's extremely important that we are reminded of these important historical facts, because those are facts, and current developments to indeed get inspiration. Because the place where we are today is a difficult one. So we need really to be reminded of these important, insightful events to boost our moral and also maybe align our strategic orientation and vision as to where we need to go next, where the continent needs to go next. And let me also, I came to this meeting with the story of this young Ivoirian, his name is Loan Krikum, who just won the, he came number one in one of these literature tests in Canada. He's a 10-year-old, Ivorian, and he showed that once given the opportunity to compete on equal footing, indeed, young Africans can outperform the rest of the world and be role models for others also to follow suit. Meanwhile, he and all of us in this room are the privileged ones who know really the value of education. We know the power of education as, of course, human rights, as articulated clearly in the UDHR, the Universal Declaration for Human Rights, Article 26, the right for each and everyone to really access education. And that once we have it, we can indeed be force for transforming our societies. And this is where really I want to reflect a little bit on the extremely strategic decision made by African leaders and to make education this year, but it's not the first time that leaders, as our sister Fatima just reminded us, committed to making education a strategic objective for the continent. When you see the strategic vision 2016-2025 adopted by the African Union, indeed, it puts education at the center of what could indeed transform the way we deal with our development and indeed be a catalyst for achieving all other SDGs and, of course, helping the continent to move towards the Africa it wants. I must nevertheless really make a pause and observe that today we are really at the crossroad. The numbers are not speaking fully in our favor. I was just last week in Dar es Salaam as we were commemorating the 20th anniversary of the AU Peace and Security Council. And there, we were reminded that the billions of Africans who will be on the market by 2050, 2.5 billion Africans will be on the market. And that currently the median age of the continent is 19 years old. And that we can only be able to play our fullest role in this global arena. Indeed, if we have people who are educated, qualified, and prepared to respond to the challenges that today's world is posing on the continent, and that our youth will not be lured to take huge risks, cross the Mediterranean Sea, and die by the thousand in search of a better world for themselves and their families. So what we may have to really also consider is, given that really we stand today at a crossroad, and that education, my sister Fatima and I were sitting last week, led by the DSG, Amina Mohammed, and her counterpart, the deputy chairperson of the African Union Commission, in a very strategic meeting in which both organizations, based on our strategic partnership, were really unpacking the whole development agenda. And education was one of the issues discussed. And we were reminded somehow that education is ultimately a development agenda issue. And then if you look at it in this way, even if we do agree that the new technologies have an immense potential to really help the continent to leverage its fullest potential and leapfrog to the next, to the 21st century type of education that we need, it will be extremely difficult to achieve if we cannot be full participants in the added value that the economy requires, that we become, that the continent is capable of producing wealth. Wealth production is what will determine ultimately the ability of the continent to take part in the global economy. But one of the points I made in that meeting is that at the moment, it is left to each and every individual country to achieve it. Whereas we know that most countries are not viable, economically speaking. And it's a privilege for South Africa, for example, and I'm so happy to hear that, that AI is becoming compulsory in the education of youngest, of students. But how many African countries can do it? So that's why we cannot totally talk about education without keeping in mind the SGs and the DSGs and other like-minded leaders, the strong push into asking for a more fairer world for all of us, that Africa gets its fair share, that issues of debt relief, that issues of access to credit, the extortionate cost of credit, which is making investment in education almost impossible, that all these issues are taken, very seriously because it's a development agenda. And that, as we move towards the summit of the future, those issues as front and center, that they are really tackled with. And in that regard, the fact that the Union is now becoming a full member of the G20, which is going to provide a new platform for the continent to articulate a clear vision, a united vision, a unity of purpose in advancing, asking for justice for the continent in a number of issues that so far are not really working for it. But having said this, I also made the point that a few things can be done. Of course, individual countries will continue to have ultimate responsibility to advance education for themselves and for their people and for the children. Of course, this entails for them addressing any governance gaps, mobilizing national resources, making strategic projections, ensuring that every single penny will count in the way it will, of course, be invested in advancing the well-being of their people. But partnership, strategic partnership, a partnership that is built on, underpinned by international solidarity, multilateralism, to ensure that as we do it, Africa is given, its fair share, will continue to be a request, a demand that the continent should be able to make, so that while counting on its own individual forces, they also can benefit for a conducive environment that would that would really help it to leapfrog and catch up to be a key player in this 21st century. Now, the missing piece for me remains one, and the same, I will end with that. There is what is called, of course, the conflict gap, that the more we are unable to really invest in education and in the well-being of people, the more they will be left behind, and the more they will be exposed and lured to participate in all sorts of activities, and certainly being lured into what is becoming a major threat for the continent is the growing threat of terror and violence extremism. These are really serious issues that we have to keep in mind in order to prioritize education. And this means the kind of education that is given to our countries, that education becomes also a tool for building peaceful minds on the continent, and also nurturing more inclusive societies, so that as we grapple with the challenge of development, at least we can really build more inclusive in our diversity, more richer, more diverse, more tolerant societies that care, that provides for the needs of girls and women on an equal footing, to really narrow areas of grievances that may not be addressed and could potentially lead to conflict. So I will leave it there at this point. I wrote a lengthy statement, which I believe has been made absolutely obsolete by the comments made by Sister Gumbi. But really, what is, again, for me, the missing link is the following. And my last point. Yes, each and every country has the responsibility to lead education, knowing the constraints that are affecting countries as we speak. But if there is no strategic vision through which the continent will identify drivers and areas of where they will mutualize their resources, pull together resources, focus on science and technology. And this fellow of ours who is in Japan, I mean, he has certainly a place to occupy on this continent. But where is the framework for him to come and others to mobilize this knowledge? Because without knowledge and technology, there will be no added value into the wealth of resources that the continent has. And as long as you don't break what I call you don't pass the needle test, that you cannot produce a needle with everything you have. You will not add anything. You will not produce wealth. And therefore, it will be almost impossible for us to really address the huge and growing needs of African youth. And so that the continent, taking care of itself, will contribute positively to this global world and have a place, that is, of course, commensurate to its importance. So I will leave it there, but thank you again for this opportunity to discuss the most critical issue for this continent.